For the past few years, we've seen an increase in the number of teams that are offering just one bike to their riders for the majority of race days. The do-it-all race bike is back, and we'd bet that the mechanics of the Tour de France are rather happy about that. Here are 6 of the fastest in this year's race.
Now, before we dive into our picks, we just want to remind you that if you like this video, give it a like, and if you're liking our YouTube content, then subscribe to the channel, because that really helps us to grow. Now, we should point out at this point that not all of the picks are the only race bike option for the teams. Trek, for example, Trek Segafredo still offers its riders the Madone. But they've given the EMONDA Aero touches that make it suitable for the majority of the stages. You'll only see, the faster riders on the Trek Segafredo team opting for the more Aero Madone.
Actually, Dave, going back to one point there, why are the mechanics going to be happier with just one bike?
Now, I think it just comes down to simplicity. So just one type of road bike makes preparing for a race that bit easy. You only need spares of one frame model for a start, and that applies to all of the frame-specific parts like special seat posts and increasingly integrated handlebars for the aero gains there.
They're also quite picky, those pros, aren't they, about their positions?
They are quite picky, yes. Now, Liam, why don't we start with the bike that won the first stage of this year's race, the Specialized S-Works TARMAC SL7. Now, Julian Alaphilippe stomped on the pedals about 2k from the finish. No one ever saw him again. Brilliant. Coming in at just a smidge over the UCI's minimum weight limit of 6.8 kilo. This bike is obviously no slouch off the line, so acceleration is very brisk. And then once you're up to speed, those aerodynamic gains come into play. They seem to be far more important at much lower speeds than most aero bikes we've ridden. On the SL7, that feeling kicks in at around 18 miles an hour. And once you get the bike up there, it just feels like it rolls along, so you're always on top of that gear. And it makes for a very efficient ride and an impressive average speed once you get home.
Yeah.
Well, you'll know because you've got one.
I've got one. When I'm not crashing, it's very good. A lot of the aero bonuses are coming from the Roval Rapide CLX wheels. The front, especially with its 51mm depth and 35mm external rim width.
Which is enormous.
Yeah, we'd also bet that the Aerofly 2 bar and clean front ends come into play as well.
Definitely. And alongside that low weight and wind cheating design, the Tarmac SL7 also delivers on the stiffness front. Specialized hasn't gone for massive looking tube profiles to create the stiffness. It hasn't gone for a particularly hugely wide bottom bracket shell either that would use press fits. Instead, it's plumped for threaded option T47 with the cups mounted externally.
That's making it very easy to live with, I have to say. This bike hasn't just been winning uphill with world champion Alaphilippe though. Sprinter Mark Cavendish, well, he had me screaming at the telly. When he
won a little tear.
Oh yeah, right in the feels. When he won his first stage in 5 years at the Tour. And he only went and doubled up the other day.
Brilliant. So it's a proper do-it-all bike, which is the kind of thing we're talking about in this video today.
Next up is Canyon's AEROAD CFR race bike that Alpecin Fenix, Arkea Samsic and Movistar, they're all using.
3 teams on the AEROAD. Now, at the time of recording this, Movistar and Arkea hadn't done much winning, but Alpecin Fenix have done plenty with Van der Poel and Willier both taking stage wins, and Van der Poel also spending time in the yellow jersey.
The updated Canyon AEROAD was launched last October and has already had quite an eventful history. Some users complained of excessive wear to the seat post, and the German brand issued a stop ride order relating to the CP0018 cockpit. This led to the pros using different bars with the cables running partially externally and then entering the frame in drilled holes.
Yeah, not ideal, and especially since the new bars were so innovative as well.
Yeah.
But issues aside, it wouldn't be a good aero bike without some numbers to back it up. So why is the new bike better than the old one? Canyon say that at 45 kilometers an hour, it's more efficient than the previous version by 7.4 watts, so you need to put less power out to hold the same speed.
So Canyon actually worked with Swisside for the new bike. You might know Swisside from their wheels or from the work they've done with DT Swiss. The Swisside team have extensive experience in aerodynamics from working with Formula One, so they kind of know what they're doing.
Yep.
And the design process for this bike was much more involved than it had been before.
I've been in the wind tunnel with Swisside.
Really?
Yeah, very interesting.
Were you aero?
I wasn't aero, no. We've already seen climbers like Warren Barguil and Alejandro Valverde use it on the big mountain stages. That's because this aero bike is light enough to be built up to the UCI's 6.8 kilo weight limit. And if your bike can be light and aero, well, why would you need to choose?
Exactly.
That's the whole point.
Team Ineos have new bikes just in time for the Tour this year, and we love this one because it comes with an abundance of juicy stats that we're unable to verify.
Absolutely, we haven't even seen one in the flesh yet. Yeah, the Italians, they love a stat. They also love a 3-letter acronym, but I don't think it's got any of those printed on the frame. Bit disappointing. Anyway, the Dogma F frame is 9% lighter than the F12, and the fork is 16% lighter, which is a pretty big deal. The disc frame kit, which includes the seat post and the headset and the fork and the Talon cockpit, is 265 grams lighter than the F12. It's 12% stiffer around the bottom bracket, and there are some interesting aero stats too. So the disc brake version is 4.8% more aerodynamic than the equivalent Dogma F12, while the rim brake version is 3.2% more aerodynamic than the equivalent. So that this time gives the disc brake model a lower drag than the rim brake model for the first time.
Oh, and that disc model, when built up with Shimano Dura Ace Di2 9100 and DT Swiss Arc 1400 wheels, that weighs 6.8 kg, though that doesn't include pedals. The bike is so new that, like Dave said, we haven't been able to get our hands on one just yet. Ineos are the only team at the Tour on this bike, and they're actually one of the teams that has consistently gone with one do-it-all bike. That said, we have seen them switching out sponsor-correct Shimano wheels to lightweight and now Princeton Carbon Works hoops, so they do have a bit of work to do to get the bikes down to the weight for the mountains.
Yeah, they're still surfing that 6.8 kilo wave, aren't they? Now, on to Trek. Now, the latest iteration of Trek EMONDA focuses on aerodynamics more than ever before. And this is one that we have tested. So the stiff frame set offers up a really firm and fun ride, and the component choice keeps the weight down to exploit that stiffness on the climbs. It's a really good all-round package. We tested the SL6 Pro version, which is like quite a long way down from the top, but really good. Like the Dogma F, there are some top trumps figures which come with this. So the top level SLR frame weighs 698 grams and is made from a new material, OCLV 800 series carbon. The EMONDA frame features tube profiles shaped for aero efficiency, and the cable routing is hidden to add to this. You'll see on our bike that's only partially hidden because it doesn't have the integrated cockpit. Unlike the Dogma F, the EMONDA is a disc brake only design.
So Trek wanted it to be fast up the mountains at the Tour, so they picked Alpe d'Huez as a benchmark. The climb is 13.8 kilometers at an average gradient of 8.1%. And Trek claims that the new bike saves a 70 kg rider that's putting out 350 watts, 15 seconds.
What I wouldn't give to be a 70 kilo rider. I can probably imagine 350. Stiffness through the fork and the lower half of the frame is really impressive, and that means the Trek is really responsive to your inputs. It's got a nice wide bottom bracket shell that allows for a large down tube and chunky chainstays to reduce flex when you're really nailing it. And the front end backs this up with a tapered head tube and firm fork legs. Sprinting and climbing can do it all. Yep. Absolutely.
So the aero tweaks have turned it into a very fast and efficient bike that still manages to deliver on the weight front. And we'll be looking out for the Trek Segafredo boys putting the bike to good use.
What's that team called again?
There you go.
Okay, on to WILIER. The WILIER FILANTE SLR is a lightweight aero road bike that offers reactive performance, quick handling, and a surprisingly comfortable ride to the teams of Astana and Total Energie. If WILIER is to be believed, it's aerodynamically efficient across a range of real-world conditions. That's what they say.
So first, the Filante's acceleration is actually really impressive. It's another bike that we've tested from a standing start, getting up to speed after a tight turn, or simply when you're trying to put some daylight between you and the rest of the bunch. You're rewarded with easy speed when you flick the pedals.
Now, the Filante holds onto that speed very well. WILIER uses truncated and ACA airfoils for the tube profiles. They're very common in the pro peloton now, and there's nothing unusual in that. Bike manufacturers are always taking an aerofoil shape and chopping the tail off so that the airflow behaves almost as if it's still there, and that saves material and it saves weight and it avoids handling issues. It's pretty much standard practice. The difference, according to WILIER, is what it has done with the cut-off at the rear of the tube.
So WILIER has softened that cut. Rather than being totally squared off, the edges are more round. It's not a gentle curve back there, but it's not abrupt either. But what does this actually mean in the real world?
Well, WILIER says that it makes the bike a bit more slippery in a wider range of wind directions, effectively. So more yaw. Whatever's happening with the tube shapes, the Filante is an absolute delight out on the road. That's what Matt found when he tested it. As well as being light, it feels stiff. So if you launch your biggest out of the saddle attack and it remains tight and rigid around the bottom bracket, and the fork and the stocky head tube keeps everything firmly under control up front, that's just what you want, isn't it? Fast cornering is good, and the quick handling allows you to chop and change your line with the minimum of effort. I mean, it's a really good all-rounder.
Yeah, when you guys are talking about front end stiffness, you know.
I know all about it, mate.
Yeah.
It has to be good.
You're a lot stronger than me. Next up is the COLNAGO V3 RS, and to be fair, right now, this looks like the one that's going to be painted up yellow in Paris.
Certainly does, yeah.
Pogacar is looking in tremendous form. Obviously, saying things like that can age really badly, so feel free to laugh at us in the comments in a few weeks' time if he doesn't win.
Yeah. Well, maybe we've jinxed him.
Probably.
That'll make for a more interesting race anyway. Now, the V1R first appeared in 2014, and this bike, which launched in 2019, is the third version. The clue's in the name there. And it's a line of bikes you could probably say was ahead of its time. So 7 years ago, bikes were trying to be light, or they were trying to be aero, and they were not trying to be both. So COLNAGO's an early adopter, shall we say?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the latest bike is better, and COLNAGO claims a stiffness increase of 12% over the previous bike. That's at the back.
Okay.
At the front, it's 6%, while also being more vertically compliant, of course, because that's the law. Yeah, fully internal cabling is also the law these days, and COLNAGO has its own system for that based on the TFS fork and the SR9 stem, which routes the cables straight into the head tube.
Brilliant. And design-wise, you're getting the squared-off rear tube profile that we talked about earlier. It's becoming increasingly common. And the seat stays are dropped a bit. Not as much as some of the other bikes we've looked at in this video, though. The bike's been updated to take up to 28mm tyres, and they've lowered the bottom bracket just a few millimetres to compensate for those taller tyres.
Now, this isn't one that we've actually reviewed, so we can't give you our own take on how it rides. But Pogacar doesn't seem to have any troubles, so I guess we'd all be out of excuses anyway. Okay, so there's our pick of 6 of the best all-rounders in the Tour de France peloton. Obviously, there's more bikes that we could have talked about.
Loads more.
The Cannondale Super 6, the Factor Ostro VAM, the BMC Team Machine SLR, the Scott Addict. The list kind of goes on. Let us know which one is your favourite in the comments below. I'm sure we'll all agree.
I'm sure we will.
Yeah.
And while you're down there, hit the like button if you've enjoyed this video, and subscribe to see more from us. Right, enough talking about the tour. We're going to get back to watching it.
Yeah, I think we're about 10k from the finish, so
see you soon.